I think the third party, maybe a non-biased, a more neutral party, maybe utilizing some of the technology, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence, keep in mind like the data security, data privacy will be the highest priority. That might give some visibility, like another reference point, right? In terms of where the big picture is, where the high level forecast might be.
Yes, and that's exactly the point. It's utilizing an independent third party. No single player in the ecosystem could do this because of the nature of the information. So the premise of trying to work at improving demand forecasting is using that independent third party with artificial intelligence to help and just to feed out information. Nobody would get information that's not applicable to them. It would only go back to the relevant stakeholder, what would be useful for them as part of their planning processes.
Yeah, I can see this extremely helpful in a way that, let's use electrification as an example, right? When more and more electronics needs to be embedded in all different devices, capabilities, machinery, both software and hardware enable, having more of a central point in terms of the forecast overview across industry, right? For some common demand, common resources, I think would be really, really helpful. Because from industry standpoint, I understand, company are competing with each other within the same industry, right? But from industry to industry, you'll be amazed about how much they are actually going to be competing on the common resources as well. Moving forward, especially the wave of electrification is coming. But yet, right, they don't talk to each other. They don't know each other at all. So I think having that third party with a platform providing that type of information would be super helpful, at least for the supply chain to get ready.
Yeah, and one of the, there's all the talk about investments that are being made at the foundry with the semiconductor suppliers to address this in the future. And that, again, takes time and planning before capacity comes out. But one of the challenges we have today is the most significant shortages we have are on the older technology nodes, where there isn't as much investment taking place. And so those older technology nodes will continue to cause problems until we get sufficient demand or we get more customers to transfer to the newer technologies. And that's always been a trade-off as well. So giving more insight into capacity output and future roadmaps for products to customers will certainly help make those decisions. And it's something that Flex works with every day. We have such a broad customer base and supplier base, and we work very closely with our suppliers to and look at them and cost and quality and timeliness and, all of those aspects, what their, future roadmap is. So we're able to help our customers with some of their selection process to be able to say, these are suppliers that are going to have better capacity that meet your technology needs and are a good choice for you as you're looking at, redesigning your bill of materials.
I feel like technology might be ready, right, to tackle a challenge like this, to provide demand transparency. Maybe the biggest challenge is really about how much, each company, the human behavior side of it, willing to make that happen and how much we feel comfortable about it.
About the true demand and using the artificial intelligence, it's not expecting any change of human behavior. It's taking industry growth targets and artificial intelligence and helping, rationalize that. Because, you want to have people being very excited about their product and growing their portfolio and expanding it. So keeping that into consideration, I think, is important. And the nice thing about, if we get to a level of matched supply and demand. I think what everybody wants is for supply chain to go back into the background, right? So we don't have to talk about it every day. Everybody talks about supply chain and have been for years. Well, historically, our supply chains were built on low cost efficiency and they worked very well. Nobody really talked about supply chain or the impact. What has really happened now is it's come to the front of the organization. It's an enabler for business as opposed to a cost center. So I think that change in supply chain and how it's viewed by organizations is very timely, and it's very appropriate because an efficient supply chain, cost-effective, efficient, and quality supply chain can do tremendous benefit to a company's revenue and profits. On the flip side, an inefficient supply chain that's not managed well can, cause devastating consequences for a company. So as much as I'd like it not to be all about supply chain anymore because it's kind of getting a little tiresome after 2 years, the fact that it has been elevated, I think, as a visibility within professions and within companies is appropriate.
Yeah, I love this. The comments that you made earlier, supply chain should go back to the background, everything, let everything back to normal. I was on a panel last week and we were talking about the supply chain risk and how should the board view supply chain. And then I had this guest speaker next to me. He was a president and CEO of a medical device company. And he actually shared, I thought it's very much relevant to what you just said. He said, in the past, right, sales marketing decide to forecast. So in a way that you would see a chief revenue officer, right, coming from that division. So these days is basically whatever, how many they can produce, whatever, how many, the supply chain can come together, that's the number they're going to sell. So in a way that the COO, the chief supply chain officer, also wear ahead these days as a chief revenue officer. And that's probably not the optimal point for business. We really wanted to go back to normal, that we can actually forecast according to the customer demand, not really constrained by supply capability.
Exactly.
This technological advancement in tracking and technology like AI, it's easier than ever to take control of your end-to-end process and also take the first step towards increasing transparency within the supply chain system. As a tradition of our program, I hope to build an intellectual bridge between the current and the future generations. Einstein said, any intellectual fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. So Lynn, how would you paint a picture for supply clarity through demand transparency by giving it a new perspective?
It's interesting. You made a good point there with, and I think it resonates for supply chain professionals. One of the core aspects we need to do is take the complex and make it simple. Whether that's in communicating with the leadership team, communicating with the board of directors. Sometimes you'll hear like, well, what is there one impact to a supply chain? And in fact, it's multiple impacts. And that's certainly what we've been seeing right now. And I think it's similar in trying to drive better demand transparency. Take the very complex and break it down to as simple of information that you can follow. If we can take the complexity of, you think Flex, we have 1,000 customers, right? There's hundreds of thousands of customers using technology today in their products. Some not traditional where they haven't used them before. So the forecasting and demand and ability to anticipate future markets is incredibly difficult for all companies in the ecosystem. But we have all that data. So how can we take the very complex and make it more simple and actionable data? I mentioned the older technology nodes. And there's a reason, there's less capacity output today than there had been. And there's also a reason why they continue to be utilized by many companies because, kind of workhorses of the industry. So can we get to a point where we're able to really, accurately forecast that at a product family level for the next 3, 5, 7 years? That would be tremendously important information for companies that are making those investments. So, yeah, I think at the core of it, it's an incredibly complex supply chain that as the technology expanded into the mass market, that proliferation of content added on to it, the large scale demand coming from 5G, EV, consumer goods. There's that need to make the complex simple. And I think I'll steal that from now on because I think it fits this initiative very well.
Yeah. So one of the challenges for our guest speakers to come up with an analogy, with the concept that we're trying to do here. So do you have that metaphor that you might want to share with our audience?
Yes. And I did come up with one, and it's being a chef. And I am not anywhere near a chef. I love going to a restaurant, but you're intrigued by it, right? Because say you're a chef in a really busy and popular restaurant, and you need to make sure everything runs smoothly to be successful. So you're reliant on your members of your team supplying a timely and accurate information. We need to know how many people are going to be joining for dinner and at what times to make sure you have enough people there to serve them and the right ingredients to make them. And the wait staff then needs to, give accurate information on orders and any requested changes from the guest and communicate that very clearly to the cooking staff. And then they need to make all these dishes that take different amounts of time to end up coming out at the table at the right time, at the right place to serve the customer. So I view that a little bit as a day-to-day experience and a supply chain. So anytime you're going into a busy restaurant, recognize there's a tremendous amount of work being done to manage that complex supply chain to get those meals to your table.
Well, I love it because I think the best experience you're within a restaurant is it seems like seamless, right? Mm-hmm. And it delivered to your table. It seems like effortless. But, if you go back to the kitchen, that you see how crazy and how complex that preparation and all the coordination among all the staff. That's beautiful analogy. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also have one to exchange that idea with you. So imagine you're stuck in traffic and don't know what caused the congestion. You have no idea how long it would take to solve the problem, or if there's an alternative route to take for faster arrival. Meanwhile, your next appointment is approaching, and you lack the information to effectively communicate with the meeting organizer. Now, let's turn on Google Maps, which provides real-time traffic flow and suggests alternative paths with estimated arrival time for each option. Instantly, you have sufficient information to make an informed decision that works best for your situation. So in my analogy, the visibility data and timely feedback provided by Google Maps illustrate the criticality of demand transparency in supply chain.
Very nice.
Lynn, I appreciate your leadership, in driving demand transparency and your partnership in exploring the different perspectives of the elephant in the room today with me. What is the final thoughts or one thing that you would like our audience to remember?
I would like everybody to remember that, it's been, a challenging 2 years. And if you really think about the past 2 years, people want to talk about the fragility of supply chain or things are broken. It's actually pretty impressive what supply chain professionals have done despite all of those disruptions to continue, to power the supply chains around the world. So I think it's an incredibly, fascinating profession. It's fast-paced, it's exciting, and we do really need to continue to work together and share knowledge, share best practice, share the learnings that you've had, the good and the bad, to enhance and enable all of our companies going forward to be able to address and respond and prevent future disruptions.
Yeah, that's a very good summary of whatever happened in the last 2 years, the craziness that we deal with, as well as I think it gives a lot of encouragement, for what's coming. So Lynn, with the tremendous visibility that you have, with all the industry customers and global presence of Flex, do you think which part of the cycle are we in? Are we like at the bottom, so we're going to see the light in the tunnel soon? Or do you think we're heading to another storm? Of course, the Ukraine war just happened, a lot of things that we never expected things like this 2 years ago, right? So any word of wisdom that you would give it to us, help us to better understand where we are?
Yeah, for me personally, it's the worst, and it's because of the war in the Ukraine. You add on the humanitarian crisis that we're experiencing on top of all of the shortages. Flex actually has a production facility in the Ukraine, and so we're working on managing the supply chain of raw material and critical goods into the country to continue to support our employees. And I actually saw a question in the chat about the neon gas and coming from the Ukraine. And, that's a really important point that he was made, because the Ukraine, and a lot of people may not know this, but Ukraine supplies 75% of the neon gas used to make semiconductors. So you do an analysis, but 75%, it's just pretty overwhelming, right? We're going to have an impact. The one thing that we are hearing is there's some supply, so it really depends upon how much time it takes, for the war to come to an end and the impact there. But everybody's been wanting to predict when we're going to see, a return to normal, and it's very challenging because you can only predict knowing what you know today and saying if there are no future crisis. Well, we're not to that point yet. Just this week Shanghai shut down, and so we're dealing with the impact of the supply chain coming out of Shanghai, and we've been dealing with other cities and countries. So it's difficult to predict when we'll come out. A lot of suppliers are saying they'll see more increased output at the end of this year. Some are saying into 2023, and I mentioned the older technology nodes that will take longer to recover. So we are in a very challenging time. The good news is we have over 2 years behind us, and we're here where we're at today. So hopefully we'll be seeing a return to normal sooner rather than later.
Yeah, this is a great reminder, Lynn. Shanghai shut down because the pandemic situation break out over there. And it's a good reminder that we're still in the middle of the pandemic, although we have tired, right, about living this crisis. So I really hope that our conversation today leads to many more discussion in the industry about the supply clarity through demand transparency. So thank you so much, Lynn, for, having this chat with me today. I also like to thank everyone for attending our live webinar and listening to our podcast. Please share it with your network if you like our program, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.